Good morning, Alex and friends. I'm Grace. Today is Saturday, November 29th, 2025, and you're listening to Alex's News. The high in Riverside today is 73 degrees, with a low of 47, so enjoy the mild fall weather, but bundle up tonight. Coming up, we'll explore the reasons behind President-elect Trump's plan to pardon a Honduran drug convict, unpack why $3.6 billion in heating aid finally arrived after the record government shutdown, and cover other key stories from around the world. All this and more on Alex's News. Stay tuned. Good morning. We're following a late-breaking move from the White House that's reverberating through Central America and U.S. courts. President Trump says he intends to pardon former Honduran President Juan Orlando Hernandez, who's serving a 45-year sentence in federal prison. Our reporter Ethan's with us. Ethan, what exactly did the president announce yesterday?
He posted on Truth Social from West Palm Beach on November 28th, which is yesterday relative to today, November 29th, saying he plans a, quote, full and complete pardon, end quote, for Juan Orlando Hernandez. NBC News, PBS NewsHour, and NPR all reported that he argued Hernandez had been treated very harshly and unfairly, citing opinions from people he respects. The Guardian and the Washington Post also echoed that language across their coverage, underscoring that this wasn't a trial balloon from anonymous aides. It was the president himself saying it publicly.
Remind us who Hernandez is and why he's in a U.S. prison.
Hernandez led Honduras for 2 terms, from 2014 through early 2022, and was extradited to the U.S. in April 2022 after leaving office. Prosecutors in the Southern District of New York accused him of turning Honduras into a narco state by taking millions from traffickers to move cocaine north. According to NPR's summary of the case, they called it a cocaine superhighway to the United States. A Manhattan jury convicted him in March 2024 on conspiracy to import cocaine and firearms counts. And in June 2024, Judge P. Kevin Castell gave him 45 years, a $8 million fine, and 5 years of supervised release. Justice Department records quoted by the Washington Post note the judge described him as a, quote, two-faced politician hungry for power, end quote. He's been serving at USP Hazleton in West Virginia while appealing, and he's maintained his innocence, saying the case leaned on traffickers seeking lighter sentences.
So if the president wants to pardon him, can he just do it with a post?
Not quite. The Constitution gives the president broad pardon power, but a social media announcement isn't the legal instrument. The Washington Post and a P point out you need a signed pardon warrant sent to the Justice Department's Office of the Pardon Attorney. From there, a certified copy goes to the Bureau of Prisons to actually release someone, and as of this morning, there's no record of any of that. No DOJ docket, no BOP update. CBS News and The Guardian note Trump can bypass the usual OPA review, but even then, Justice.gov guidance says acceptance by the recipient is required, and a verbal or informal move is vulnerable if challenged.
Has the White House or Justice Department said anything official since last night?
Not so far. CBS News and AP both reported there have been no formal statements from the White House, DOJ, OPA, or the BOP confirming a signed warrant or implementation steps. That means, procedurally, Hernandez's status is unchanged today. He remains incarcerated at Hazleton pending his appeal unless and until a properly executed pardon arrives.
What's Hernandez's family saying about this?
They're celebrating. NBC News says his wife, Ana Garcia, and their children gathered outside their Tegucigalpa home, the same place where he was arrested in 2022, kneeling in prayer after the post went up. Garcia told reporters that his, quote, voice broke with emotion, end quote, when they told him, and she called the U.S. case a coordinated plot by traffickers in the radical left, praising Trump for correcting an injustice. NPR and The Guardian carried those comments. His attorney, Renato Stabile, issued a statement of thanks, saying, quote, a great injustice has been righted, end quote, and predicting closer U.S.-Honduran ties and a, quote, triumphant return, end quote, while another lawyer, Sabrina Schroff, declined to comment, according to PBS NewsHour and NBC.
Walk us through the case details the president is stepping into here.
The prosecution's narrative was sweeping. NPR and PBS note that DOJ alleged Hernandez protected select traffickers while waging a public drug war, taking millions in bribes, and using state power to move more than 400 tons of cocaine toward the U.S. over years. The judge, cited by Justice.gov and reported by the Washington Post, emphasized that duplicity at sentencing and prosecutors linked the network to violence and machine guns, which is why the weapons counts were so significant. His brother, Tony Hernandez, a former congressman, is already serving a life sentence from a related case, which underscored for the jury the credibility of the wider conspiracy.
What's the legal bottom line if a pardon does get signed? Does it wipe out the conviction?
A full pardon would forgive the federal offenses and free him from the sentence, but it doesn't declare him innocent or expunge the record. It's an act of executive clemency. According to Justice Department guidance and constitutional scholars quoted by outlets like the National Constitution Center in aggregated reports, the recipient has to accept a pardon for it to take effect, and it doesn't cover civil liabilities or foreign charges. It would also end his ongoing appeal as moot, because there'd no longer be a life sentence to challenge.
The timing jumped out. Why announce this 2 days before Honduras votes?
It's hard to miss the political message. The Washington Post and NPR report the same Truth Social post, also endorsed Nasri or Tito Asfura, the conservative National Party candidate who once served as Tegucigalpa's mayor and shares Hernandez's party lineage. Trump called Asfura, quote, the only true friend of freedom, end quote, pledged U.S. support and anti-drug cooperation if he wins, and warned of pulling aid and, quote, catastrophic results, end quote, if he loses, framing Honduras as a front in a fight against, quote, narco-communists, end quote. That's an extraordinary intervention just 2 days before the November 30th vote, which, as of today, is tomorrow.
Does that endorsement change anything on the ground?
It could energize National Party voters and signal that a President Trump would favor a government led by Asfura, which some analysts say might matter with undecided voters. But polls are tight, and the Washington Post and CBS News point out there are worries about electoral integrity and the potential for unrest after the count, especially with the military requesting ballot copies, which raised eyebrows among observers. The Guardian notes Asfura denies past embezzlement accusations and has focused on infrastructure talk, while rivals like Rixi Moncada of the ruling Libre Party and Salvador Nasrallah of the Liberal Party are fighting for their own blocs. Trump even called Nasrallah a, quote, borderline communist, end quote, saying he's splitting the opposition.
Does this square with Trump's broader approach in the region?
It does. NPR and NBC have detailed how the administration has ratcheted up pressure on Venezuela's Nicolas Maduro, including strikes on suspected drug boats and a naval buildup in the Caribbean, while simultaneously hinting at openness to talks. In Honduras, outgoing President Xiomara Castro, a leftist, has pursued a pragmatic line despite ideological differences, hosting U.S. officials, stepping back from ending extradition and military pacts, and cooperating on deportations, according to PBS NewsHour and NPR. A pardon for Hernandez and explicit favor for Asfura signals a preference for conservative partners while asserting leverage over anti-drug cooperation and U.S. aid.
What about the optics inside the U.S. pardoning someone a U.S. court called part of a massive trafficking scheme?
It's controversial and will likely draw sharp criticism. The DOJ's portrayal of Hernandez as central to one of the world's most violent trafficking conspiracies, echoed by NPR and PBS, means a pardon would be seen by many as overriding a jury, a federal judge, and a lengthy investigation. Supporters will argue, as his lawyer did, that witness credibility is suspect when cooperators seek lighter sentences. Critics will counter that the court had a full 2-week trial and imposed a stiff sentence with detailed findings. It's the classic clash between executive clemency power and judicial outcomes.
If the White House moves forward today, what would actually happen and how fast?
First, The president or designated staff must issue a signed pardon warrant naming Hernandez and specifying the offenses. That document gets transmitted to DOJ's Office of the Pardon Attorney. The OPA would authenticate and inform the Bureau of Prisons, which then instructs USP Hazleton to process the release. Those notifications show up in BOP systems. AP and CBS News note that timelines can vary, but once paperwork is in order, the physical release can be rapid, hours to a day, though international logistics and any immigration holds can complicate departure. Until that chain starts, though, nothing changes, which is exactly where things stand this morning.
Could there be any legal challenge to a signed pardon?
The president's power to pardon federal crimes is extremely broad, and courts have been reluctant to second-guess it. There could be political blowback or congressional oversight, but constitutionally, as the Washington Post and constitutional scholars summarized, it's hard to block. One wrinkle is acceptance. If Hernandez or counsel were to question terms, that could delay effectuation, but given their public gratitude, that seems unlikely.
You mentioned his appeal. Does a pardon end his chance to clear his name in court?
Practically, yes. If he accepts a full pardon, his appeal becomes moot because he's no longer subject to the punishment, and courts generally dismiss under those circumstances. Some recipients decline or delay acceptance to keep litigating for an acquittal, but NPR's reporting on his family's reactions suggests they're prioritizing freedom over a vindication in appellate court.
How are Hondurans reacting beyond his inner circle?
The public reaction is mixed and still forming. NBC News captured the celebrations at his home, but broader opinion in Honduras has long been split. Some credit Hernandez with stability in economic projects, others blame him for institutional corruption and violence linked to traffickers. The Guardian notes that inserting a U.S. pardon into the final campaign weekend could polarize voters further, either as a signal of protection for the old order or as overdue redress for what supporters call a politicized prosecution.
What's the significance of the imagery we're seeing tied to these reports?
Most outlets used Associated Press photos from his 2022 extradition, him in shackles boarding a DEA plane, which starkly reminds audiences of the U.S. government's role at every step, from extradition to trial to incarceration. PBS, NPR, and NBC leaned on that archive, linking back to prior trial coverage to give viewers continuity. It's a visual framing that contrasts sharply with the word pardon, highlighting the distance between a federal conviction and an act of mercy from the Oval Office.
Could this affect U.S. cooperation with Honduras on migration and security, regardless of who wins tomorrow?
It could. If ASFERA wins, Trump's message suggests an open spigot for aid and joint security operations, which NPR says includes anti-drug coordination the U.S. prizes. If Libre's Rixi Moncada prevails, Washington may scrutinize reforms more skeptically and condition assistance more tightly, especially after the warning about withdrawing support. Either way, a high-profile pardon sends a signal about priorities. Counter-narcotics partnerships, deportations, and defense ties are likely to be bargaining chips in early talks with the next Honduran administration.
Some folks might be asking, can a foreign leader convicted here really just walk free because a president says so?
That's how the system is designed for federal offenses. A full presidential pardon voids the federal penalty regardless of the recipient's nationality, and once the Bureau of Prisons implements it, the person is free of that sentence. There could be immigration questions or other jurisdictions with interests, but in this case the crimes were federal, and a properly executed pardon ends that custody. As AP and the Washington Post stress, it's unilateral. Congress doesn't get a veto.
What are you watching for the rest of today?
3 things. First, the paper trail assigned warrant logged at DOJ or an official White House statement. Any sign that this moves from rhetoric to legal action. Second, Bureau of Prisons updates from Hazleton, and any confirmation from Hernandez's legal team beyond broad gratitude, particularly travel plans or custody changes. And third, the Honduran campaign's final 24 hours. NPR and CBS say undecided voters are sizable, and this could be the nudge that either consolidates conservative support or galvanizes opposition turnout.
Last question. If the pardon doesn't materialize today, Does that undercut the political message?
It depends on who you ask. Supporters may say the president said his intent, and the bureaucracy needs a day or two, especially over a holiday week, and the political signal already landed before tomorrow's vote. Critics will call it a headline without substance unless a warrant appears, pointing to the Guardian's reminder that even a witnessed verbal statement can be challenged without a formal document. The practical metric is simple. If he walks out of Hazleton soon, the promise becomes reality. If not, it remains a campaign-side gambit.
Ethan, thanks for laying all of that out. We'll keep watching the paperwork and the polls through tomorrow's vote. We've got an important update on home energy assistance as winter sets in. Chloe, what changed for families overnight?
The federal government finally released roughly $3.6 billion for LIHEAP yesterday, Friday, November 28th. According to PBS NewsHour reporting from the Associated Press, states and tribes received official award letters from HHS so they can start moving money out the door. NEADA, the group representing state energy assistance directors, confirmed the rollout after weeks of delays.
So people can get help right away. Or is there still a wait?
There's still a lag. State agencies can begin processing now, but actual payments to households likely won't land until early or mid-December because of verification and vendor scheduling. Live Now from Fox noted that's pretty typical even in normal years, but the delay is especially painful with cold weather hitting.
Remind us why this money was held up in the first place.
It traces back to that record 43-day federal shutdown that stretched into mid-November. Congress didn't pass spending on time amid fights over whether to attach health policy items to stopgap funding. When the bipartisan continuing resolution was signed on November 12th, just over 2 weeks ago, agencies still needed time to restart operations, which slowed LIHEAP's release, PBS NewsHour reported.
Were politics a factor beyond the shutdown itself?
They were, and they're still simmering. HHS, led by Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr., publicly blamed congressional Democrats for the delay, while Republicans on the House Appropriations panel accused Democrats of weaponizing the process by blocking bills. Democrats, in turn, pointed to actions by the Trump administration. Live Now from Fox captured the finger-pointing on both sides without a single clean culprit.
What did the agency say internally about timing?
An internal note from the Administration for Children and Families on November 18th, 10 days ago, predicted about $3.7 billion could go out by the end of the month, citing shutdown disruptions and staffing limits. States including Pennsylvania, Illinois, Indiana, Georgia, and Nebraska reported they didn't see award letters until yesterday, which helps explain why a planned mid-month release slipped, according to AP coverage carried by PBS.
Why were staffing limits such a sticking point?
Earlier this year, HHS dismissed the entire Division of Energy Assistance staff, the very office that runs LIHEAP. NEADA's Mark Wolf testified that decision in April left the program without its core team, and he warned processing would be slower than usual even after the shutdown. Several local outlets linked by PBS NewsHour, including CT Mirror, chronicled how states were left without training or guidance heading into winter.
Did that mean some states had to change their timelines?
Yes, Pennsylvania postponed the start of its LIHEAP season from November 3rd to December 3rd, precisely because the federal dollars hadn't arrived. Georgia bumped appointments for seniors into early January, and Nebraska paused heating assistance issuances altogether. Those examples came up repeatedly in the AP reporting and state notices quoted by regional papers like the Review-Times in Ohio.
What exactly does LIHEAP cover for families?
It helps with home heating and cooling bills, but it's more than that. It can pay for emergency furnace repairs and fuel deliveries like home heating oil or propane, which is crucial because those fuels aren't always covered by winter shutoff protections. NEADA emphasized to PBS that those off-grid households are among the most vulnerable as temperatures drop.
We've heard from Mark Wolf at NEADA. What's he saying now that the money's moving?
He praised the release while stressing how late it is. In multiple outlets, he said, quote, "This release of LIHEAP funding is essential and long overdue. Families can finally begin receiving the support they need to keep the heat on as winter begins," end quote. He's also urging HHS to restore capacity so the program doesn't hit another bottleneck in December.
Do we have a sense of the overall need this winter?
It's high and rising. NEADA's energy hardship analysis, cited by Live Now from Fox, projected double-digit overall increases in costs, with electricity up more than 13% and propane over 7% year-over-year. The group told PBS that near-record utility arrears are compounding the strain on low-income households.
How does this year's timing compare with normal years?
Typically, states receive their allocations in early November, right as the heating season starts. The AP notes this year's 2 to 3 week delay hit during the most crucial ramp-up window. Many states kept emergency services going using prior year balances, but that's a thin cushion and not sustainable for long.
You mentioned staffing and guidance gaps. Has HHS posted the usual documents?
Not as of this morning. Reporters and advocates told PBS they couldn't find a fresh Dear Colleague letter, state allocation tables, or a formal press release for FY 2026 on HHS or ACF sites. That doesn't mean the money isn't moving. It is, but it adds to the sense of ad hoc execution.
Did Congress put pressure on HHS to get this out?
Absolutely. A bipartisan House letter went to Secretary Kennedy on Tuesday, November 25, 4 days ago, demanding release by November 30th because of the cold snap and the particular risk to heating oil and propane users. A separate bipartisan Senate letter earlier, on November 14th, urged the administration to fund at the maximum level allowed under the continuing resolution. According to House.gov postings cited by PBS, HHS hadn't publicly responded by today.
Any governors weighing in?
New York's Governor Kathy Hochul used a Monday press conference to call out the holdup and press for immediate release, which Live Now from Fox carried. You also saw agitation from cold weather states that rely on early November starts, with local papers in the Midwest and Northeast warning about service gaps if federal dollars didn't arrive in time.
You mentioned the program faced a bigger threat in the spring. What was that?
The administration's May 2nd budget proposal called for eliminating LIHEAP next fiscal year, arguing that increased domestic energy production and state-level protections reduce the need. Congress didn't buy that. Appropriators in both parties have historically funded it north of $4 billion. The Washington Post and other outlets have noted that pattern proposals to cut, followed by bipartisan restorations.
Is there any sign the White House tried to sit on funds after the shutdown?
There's no documented apportionment hold or impoundment flagged under the Impoundment Control Act in this case. The delays seem to have come from the shutdown itself and the hollowed-out staffing inside the LIHEAP office. That said, watchdogs are still looking for formal allocation tables which would provide more transparency on timing.
How much of the annual pie does this release represent?
NEADA and PBS NewsHour say yesterday's release is about 90% of the year's funding, plus $100 million from the infrastructure law that's earmarked for energy assistance. The remaining slice usually follows later in the season once final appropriations are set or adjusted. For now, that 90% is what keeps programs afloat in December and January.
Let's talk about who's on the receiving end. Which households are most affected?
Seniors, families with young kids, and people with disabilities are the core of this program. Massachusetts, for instance, told CT Mirror it served more than 159,000 households last winter, more than half of them seniors. NEADA told Fox that about 68% of LIHEAP households also received SNAP, so when the shutdown froze one support, it also amplified stress on food budgets.
What's the timetable now that states have their letters?
States and tribes are turning those awards into vendor payments and direct aid, which takes administrative work. many will prioritize crisis cases, no heat, broken furnaces, and schedule deliveries for heating oil and propane. Most families who applied will likely feel the relief in the first half of December, with some spillover into the second half depending on the backlog.
Any state-by-state stories stand out?
Pennsylvania's delayed opening is a good example of a domino effect. Pushing start dates means later appointments and longer waits for the most vulnerable. In the Midwest, outlets like the Review-Times say Ohio agencies were poised to ramp up the moment award letters hit inboxes yesterday. And in Georgia, senior appointments sliding to January underscores how southern states can still be pinched by cold snaps.
How are utilities and fuel dealers handling the lag?
Many are used to LIHEAP cycles and will work with agencies, especially for customers with confirmations in hand. But fuel dealers need cash to schedule deliveries, and with prices up, they're less able to front costs for long. That's why getting dollars out before the next cold spell is critical, as both Fox and regional papers have stressed.
Does this fix the staffing problem you mentioned? Or is that still hanging over the program?
It's still a concern. House appropriators have urged HHS to address the vacant LIHEAP shop, and nearly 100 House Democrats wrote on November 21st, 8 days ago, that the reckless firings in April would prolong delays. Unless those positions are refilled and guidance resumes, states worry about a winter of piecemeal updates instead of the usual steady cadence.
Big picture, how does this influence the next budget fight?
It's already a marker. Even with a proposal to eliminate the program, bipartisan pressure forced movement, and Congress has a long track record of restoring LIHEAP. If this winter sees more bottlenecks and public outcry, that will likely strengthen arguments to maintain or even increase funding, as the Washington Post has noted in past years with similar standoffs.
For families listening, what should they do right now?
Check your state energy assistance program's website or call your local community action agency. If you've applied, ask whether your application is complete and if you need to update income documents to speed processing. And if you heat with oil or propane, let your vendor know you're a LIHEAP customer so they can plan deliveries once payments are queued.
Final question. What are you watching in the next week?
Two things: whether HHS posts a formal allocation table and guidance, which would calm a lot of nerves, and whether states can convert those award letters into payments before the next cold blast. Also, whether ACF can surge temporary staff to handle the December crush. If those pieces fall into place, families should feel the difference by mid-December.
Important news for a lot of households. Chloe, thanks for walking us through it.
Thanks, Grace.
Here are some other headlines. In Trinidad and Tobago, a radar riddle turned runway real. Prime Minister Kamla Persad Bissessar has admitted U.S. Marines are on the ground in Tobago, upgrading surveillance and runway infrastructure at ANR Robinson International Airport, after previously saying no American military personnel were present. She framed the mission as a counter-narcotics boost and said secrecy was a matter of national security. But the political turbulence is now wheels up. Tobago House of Assembly Chief Secretary Farley Augustine and opposition leader Keith Rowley blasted the central government for allowing U.S. military aircraft to land without prior notification or parliamentary oversight. The episode signals a tighter tailwind with U.S. security operations as regional tensions and military muscle flexing grow around Venezuela. For Port of Spain, the runway to cooperation just became a high-visibility strip. At Peru's southern doorstep, the border beat has flipped its script. President José Herrera declared a 60-day state of emergency along the frontier with Chile, deploying the armed forces to back the national police after a chaotic surge of migrants, largely Venezuelans, blocked the Tacna-Arica crossing. Many are racing to exit Chile ahead of a December 14th runoff, in which frontrunner José Antonio Cast has campaigned on mass expulsions and warned undocumented migrants to leave while they still can. The result? A. Reverse migration. Jam Peru says it won't absorb. A diplomatic standoff that's grinding gears at the checkpoint, and a humanitarian risk rising as fast as temperatures on the tarmac. With rhetoric fueling real-world reroutes, regional cooperation is hitting turbulence at precisely the wrong moment. In Kyiv, a power player has exited stage left as war pressures mount. Andriy Yermak, President Volodymyr Zelensky's chief of staff and widely seen as Ukraine's second most powerful figure, resigned after anti-corruption agents raided his home. The searches by NABU and the Specialized Anti-Corruption Prosecutor's Office tie into a widening probe of an alleged $100 million kickback scheme in the energy sector. Zelensky said the move was needed to avoid distractions during a critical phase of the war. The timing is tectonic. Yermak had been leading sensitive peace talks with the United States, and his departure leaves a negotiating vacuum as Washington presses for progress. It's a triple shock: diplomatic disruption, intensified anti-corruption scrutiny that could condition future Western aid, and fresh tremors for political stability after other recent top-level resignations. Across Indonesia's Sumatra, communities are digging out while time and terrain conspire. The death toll from flash floods and landslides has climbed to 279, with at least 174 people still missing, according to the Associated Press. Torrential monsoon rains, turbocharged by a tropical storm, buried villages and severed roads in North and West Sumatra and Aceh, stalling heavy machinery and relief convoys. Emergency declarations are active as thousands crowd temporary shelters, short on clean water and supplies. As rescuers reach previously cut-off areas, officials fear the numbers will rise. Experts warn the forecast isn't just bad, it's a trend, with climate change and deforestation turning downpours into disaster on fast forward. And in the skies, a software snag grounded plans. Regulators have ordered urgent updates for roughly 6,000 Airbus A320 family jets after an October 30th JetBlue flight suffered an uncommanded pitchdown, linked to a software vulnerability susceptible to intense solar radiation and tied to the elevator aileron computer. The EASA and FAA mandates triggered cancellations and delays, even during the Thanksgiving travel rush. The good news: the patch is quick, hours not days, making this a brief layover rather than a long-haul grounding. Still, for fly-by-wire, that was too close to the sun. That's all we have for now. Today's episode was made by Alexander King with GPT-5, Gemini Pro 3, Gemini Flash 2.5, and Google Cloud Text-to-Speech. I hope you have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow, Alex.